Hello, everybody, and welcome back. We are now going to move into our last session of the day. But very exciting because we're talking about the future of cloud computing and the use of AI and big data for it. Cloud computing is revolutionizing how fintech companies and financial services are processing data and changing the game when it comes to applications. Today, we have a stellar panel with us, and moderating this for us will be Mr. Mohan Ram from DigitalOcean. I'm going to very quickly read out his bio, and then I'll hand it over to Mohan to take it forward. Mohan is the head of go-to-market at DigitalOcean for APAC. He's responsible for expanding the company's presence in new regions in APAC through BD, developer and startup community engagements and PR initiatives. I've known Mohan for a while, and I'm delighted to see him moderate the panel. So over to you, Mohan.
Awesome. Thanks, Mashir. Hi, everyone. Very excited to be a part of this forum here. And hopefully you've had a great day so far. And I understand this is the last panel. Hopefully it will be just as informative and insightful as some of the previous sessions you've attended. I'm particularly excited about the topic that we have for the panel today, which is evolution of cloud computing and its impact on accelerating big data analytics. And at DigitalOcean, as a cloud infrastructure company that's been around for roughly about 10 years now, we see a lot of this upfront, especially as we service a lot of startups and SMBs. And I'm very excited about the panel that we have today. Without any further ado, I would love to get our panelists to introduce themselves very quickly. If each of you could take about 30 seconds to tell us about yourself and what you do, and we'll jump right in. Mary, can we get started with you?
Absolutely. Thanks, Mohan. Special thanks to Mashir and FinTech Asia for having us all on this evening. So my name is Mary McHale. I am based in Hong Kong. I joined Equinix about 4 years ago as Business Development Director for Digital Payments and Banking, which is how I know Mashir and how I've joined this conversation. I've since moved on to a new role at Equinix. I'm responsible for strategic account sales across Asia Pacific. A quick introduction to Equinix is we are a data center and platform business. We are not the fitness company that so many people think we are, nor the car manufacturer. So what do? We provide digital infrastructure for all of the global enterprises around the world. We interconnect industry-leading organizations, whether they're in finance, manufacturing, mobility, transportation, government, healthcare, education, you name it. And what we like to say is we support our customers in a cloud-first world. And we do that by offering a platform of more than 200 data centers across 60 markets. And that gives all of those enterprises access to all major networks, cloud services, and other enterprises.
Thank you. Dr. Cham?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. So good to see all of you talking about cloud and big data. This is my favorite. So this is Dr. Cham again. Well, all my life is related to data. 30 years ago when I started my career, I worked for a database company. So it's the data, relational database. Now we went through the business intelligence, data warehousing, and now we talk about AI and big data. Cloud is a big enabler for that. So my industry experience, I worked for HSBC, IBM before, serving quite a lot of financial services company. I also, that's where I met Mashir. So I'm former Chief Population Officer of Cyberport. So we nurture quite a lot of fintech companies and AI companies, startups, I mean. So that's why we met. And currently I'm running several startups, and also I'm a professor in CU Hong Kong. And no surprise, I'm teaching a lot of AI and digital transformation stuff. So it's getting hard, everybody, because of the COVID, they are accelerating their digital transformation pace. I think this is good. So in a nutshell, that's me. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I think we'll have a lot of insightful information from you, Dr. Cham. Looking forward. Abhilash, can we go next with you?
Hi. Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Abhilash. I am the CTO at Global PayEX. We are an receivable account payable automation company. We are a fintech. We specialize in optimizing working capital of our clients, including all the way from Bridgestone to Stanley Black & Decker. I'm based out of Ireland. I'm an alumnus of Carnegie Mellon. I have been involved, I've been a techie all throughout my life. So I will be happy to answer your queries, and specifically from the financial technology aspect, regulatory aspect, we'll be happy to take.
Great. Thanks, Abhilash. Andre?
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the chance of being with you all here for a very lively discussion. So my name is Andreas Darmawan. I work for S&P Global Market Intelligence based in Tokyo, Japan. So basically my role here is as an Asia Pacific product specialist. So we are kind of like the solutions architect for the clients during the pre-sales stage of the life cycle of a deal. And so I handle mostly the data science and analytics part. So I deal with traditional data like the financials data, market price data, up to the most upcoming like alternative data like weather data, bill of lading data, textual data, and so forth. So I come from a prop trading background. My first job in the trading was 2008 during the Lehman crisis, and it was actually a very good time to test my automated trading strategy at that time. So it was like a trial by fire, but it led me here. It's a good place. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Andre. So today's topic that we have is evolution of cloud computing and its impact on accelerating big data analytics. I think it's a pretty wide topic. So what we'll do is split it into two parts, right? At first, we'll probably speak to the evolution of cloud computing and some of the key trends we've seen, let's say over the last 10 years, and then get into big data analytics and especially in the fintech space, right? With that, Mary and Dr. Chand, this question specifically for you. If you could kind of speak to what has been the tech evolution on cloud that you've seen in the last 10 years. And Mary, when we recently chatted, you said something very interesting. You said it's not about, it's gone from cloud what to cloud when. So I'd love to get started with you in terms of what you've seen in terms of the cloud evolution that's happened over the last decade or so.
Yeah, thanks, Mohan. And actually, I think it's super exciting because before I was with Equinix, I was with Citi, and that was as little as 6 years ago. And honestly, back then, the cloud was a concept, and it was a concept that was reserved for fintechs, and it was maybe, right? And now it's not a maybe, it's a how many clouds, what kind of clouds, how are we embracing clouds? But what's really driven that, I think, is technology and the evolution of technology, right? And what's happened there is that's accelerated innovation. And it's brought forward a whole series of new use cases and new business models. And it's also accelerated kind of things like, and Dr. Charm can help us along with Abhilash understand these things, but IoT and AI and machine learning, and how do all of those things rely on big data to solve new problems? And when we think about all of that, right, when we look at how each of us kind of use our phone, that's the perfect, easy example to think about it, right? How many of us use our phone actually to make a phone call? You know, when's the last time you actually used your mobile phone to make a phone call? You used it to read the news, to buy something, to check an email, to send money somewhere. You know, that's the evolution of technology. And all of that is relying on a different kind of infrastructure. And that, I think, is, you know, what we see and what we say at Equinix is kind of the cloud first world.
Dr. Chan?
Yeah, I see it from the other angle. You know, the popularity of cloud actually accelerating the digitalization. So people, if is too concerned about storage, too concerned about convenience, so there will be a lot of roadblock for digital transformation. Now everything from basically accounting now is on cloud, right? And like zero. And also whenever we're talking about anything, we are talking about it's stored on the cloud, you know, not on premises. That is a big jump, because everything about AI and big data at the end of the day is how much data, how much relevant data you have, right? We are not a magician. Without data, no matter what algorithm, not what GPU you have, there's nothing you can build on top of it. So I think I look at cloud is actually encourage more people using different type of application, right? And then it's actually helping us to accumulate more and more relevant data. right? And then we can use our data science to make sense out of it, right? Without all this data, people who concerned about the cost and convenience, and we probably do not have that kind of, massive of data and relevant data. We can build, models on that. So I think I look at it from that perspective, and actually accelerating the adoption and the power of big data as well.
Sounds good. Thanks, Dr. Chan. Abhilash, I want to get your thoughts, especially as you build your fintech startup. What are you seeing in terms of some key trends or even the traction that financial institutions, especially as you work with them to empower them with technology, especially in the cloud space? What's been the traction in terms of this adoption today versus a couple of years ago? And what do you think is specifically driving this change?
See, as you might be aware, financial technology, dealing with banks, dealing with non-banking financial entities, it's probably the most regulated industry outside of, say, defense that's out here. So cloud adoption was a challenge initially because privacy rules, what constitutes data residency, what constitutes data provisioning, that's very, very independent to each bank and to each bank's governing policies. What they have done now in the past 2 to 3 years is that it is a foregone conclusion that cloud becomes an important enabler for your analytics, considering the topic that is here, and also becomes a very important enabler for data residency at a cost that is now manageable, rather than having independent data centers managing all that stuff. So they have grown to adopt cloud, but it is also in parallel taken with your privacy rules, your OPSEC rules, your regulatory rules, your frameworks. The way financial institutions approach cloud is very different from a B2C company approaching cloud. They want to see whether the cloud provider gives a larger transparency on where actually the data is stored, where the hot DR backup is. When they say 99.5% SLA availability, what does it mean essentially, right? And they also are trying to see if their own internal metrics is mapping to the cloud metrics. For example, when they say SOC 2 compliance. So earlier the infrastructure used to be with us. So we know how SOC 2 compliance works, but now the infrastructure is with the cloud. How do they have SOC 2 compliance? It's not just a certificate that they are going to trust, but rather the process also. So financial regulatory industry has been very measured in approaching it, but now they are realizing that this is no longer just like Mary said, it's no longer a what but when kind of a question. So they are approaching it, but it is with a lot of data and architecture and a lot of data security, privacy regulations around it.
Great. Thanks, Abhilash. Andre, did you have anything to add to that in terms of what you are seeing and what might be enabling this sort of like adoption by financial institutions?
Yeah, I guess like from mostly from the user's perspective, we are seeing like one of the biggest enabler of this cloud technology from the user side is the cost keeps declining. Basically, like more and more big companies and even like mid-tier companies start to offer cloud services, and they will have to adhere to the market supply and demand. So which means like per hour access to a cloud computing is now very accessible even to like students basically. And also the growing number of the requirements of data to be analyzed, it's also like a big enabler to it. Like when I started working, basically all we were looking at to create some models were like financials data and analyst estimates data and basically very traditional data space. But right now everybody wants to do NLP. Everybody wants text data of like earnings calls from like global companies basically. And they want to do backtesting, like 10 years, 20 years backtesting on top of the current model that they already built. Now people want to do supply chain analysis. And then we know that supply chain analysis, if you just use the official data that the companies reported on who their trading partner on their 10K, 10Q, you're not going to see the whole picture of supply chain. You have to dig deeper into a more high frequency data set, for example, like bill of lading data. But when you enter this space, your data requirements grew from, let's see, 20 gigabyte to like 4 terabyte at the very minimum, basically. So, and how do you go about and tell your manager that, well, I need to buy 4 terabyte of hard disk space, basically. And if you keep doing this like with an in-house, like we're in-house solution, your IT manager will call you up like, this is undoable. Like 4 terabyte for an enterprise level database, you have to make backup a copy of it. It's going to be like, the cost is just going to be exorbitant. But now with all cloud technology, so especially like S&P Global finally adopted, like we were kind of like the last in the vendor space, but we actually, when we entered this space, we wanted to make sure that the system is scalable and the system will be 100% usable to the clients in terms of security and also basically computing power. And we partner with a company called Snowflake now to basically put most of our data set from the smallest data set into this like terabyte level bill of lading data. And moreover, then we combine this with a platform of like what we work with Databricks, and we combine this into like one basically cloud solution that can be accessed by our users anywhere in the world. Even like when they're sitting on a beach in Hawaii, they have an iPad and they have a good idea to do some data science, boom, they can do it right away. And they can access this like terabyte level of data at the time where they're very mostly comfortable. And this is like the type of people that we are going after for solutions, basically.
And say, look, the big kind of alluded to is it's not use of a cloud, it's use of multiple clouds, and it's not just use of public. And then it isn't just for consumption purposes, right? So when you think about the large banks, they're consuming the services, of S&P, they're consuming the services of global PayEX, which are born in the cloud native services, right? So it's even by nature of what they're using. MS Office is delivered via the cloud. Salesforce is delivered via the cloud. So the whole notion of cloud is kind of from a consumption base and running your own business, yes, but it's also who are you partnering with and how are those partners delivering their services?
Absolutely. Dr. Cham, just wanted to see if you had anything else to add to that point in terms of just the traction by financial institutions and how, cloud is really enabling this sort of like data literacy for financial institutions.
Yeah, this is the point I really want to, share. So in order to make a technology popular, you need to have relevant applications, put in this way. So I think in the context of big data, so what I've been helping several banks, what they're doing is very encouraging. So it's just like Airbnb. If you understand Airbnb, now it's a $100 billion US dollars company. It's impressive. I would say very, very impressive, right? So, but how about bank, right? As a traditional, highly regulated industry, how we can make use of data as good as, or not, if not better than Airbnb. It seems that it's very tough, very tough. But I'm seeing that the trend is making use of cloud, right? So I call it the democratization of data literacy to everyone in the bank. So you cannot just get 10 data scientists and then you want to make the whole bank as a data-driven bank. You have to democratize the capability and mindset to most of the employees in the bank. So it's encouraging seeing that some of them I'm helping them. Some of them they're doing it even before I help them. So they are actually have a very good strategy and roadmap how to democratize data capability to the employees. They basically have 3 parts. One, you have to make the data available to the employees, right? So they spend a lot of time to select those data and then put it on the cloud and make sure that they have all the internal APIs available. So that's one thing. So if they make use of cloud to make the data available for all the employees to use, but it's not good enough. You have to help them to learn how to use it. So a series of training to helping them to not only using Excel, of course, but also BI tools like Tableau or Power BI. More than that, they're teaching their staff to use open sources. As you and me know that all these great tools for big data and AI are all open sources, right? But how we can bridge the gap, how we can teach the end users to use open sources tools, okay, that is a challenging. But all these banks I've seen, I'm helping, they are committed to that. So they put data enable, that's also open source tools, okay? The third part is, of course, you have to train them. So data accessibility, cloud, and plus training all together. They are talking about they need to train up to 70% of the whole bank to be enabled to use data like this, right? So this is encouraging to see that a very traditional enterprise like a bank, they're so committed to that. Without cloud, it's very difficult to do that, right? But cloud is not only the solution. You need to have the assessment of the data, and also you need to have enough training, you know, junior level, senior level, they have to commit to this direction. So that's something really encouraging. If I have time, I can tell you more, but definitely this is something is really inspiring for me and become part of it as well. Thank you.
Mohan, can I add a few notes over here?
Sure. Go ahead, Abhilash.
Yeah. So I want to caution everybody that cloud is not a magic ointment that you apply and all your problems solve here. Okay. So if what Dr. Cham is saying that 70% of an organization needs to be trained because, you know, we are adopting cloud, then that is a warning sign. Lot of this cloud technologies are business services, which you would have taken up irrespective of cloud being there or not. So cloud is now today used as a larger terminology for everything. So for example, AWS offers Kafka as a service, AWS, but does your architecture really need Kafka? That is an internal alignment that you have to do. So for me, your approach to cloud should come from your architecture. Your tech arc should support cloud. It is a great enabler. And from there should all flow, not the reverse way around. Just because AWS is offering Kafka as a service doesn't mean you go for Kafka. So that is something that I want to caution everyone, that cloud is not a magic.
Absolutely. I think you make a great point, Abhilash. I'm also curious to understand from our panelists in terms of, especially if major fintech organizations are going in for the cloud, what are you institutions building their own cloud solutions, and are there pros and cons that you can speak to? And probably in the interest of time, we'll keep our answers brief, but I would love to get all of your thoughts, and we'll probably start with Andre, and then Mary, if you could chime in as well.
Yeah, I can attest to like what Dr. Charm actually mentioned earlier. It really depends on the maturity of like how comfortable the financial institutions is with the cloud, the concept of cloud, and what are their associated risks with it, and how are they able to basically convince not just their managers but also their governing bodies that, okay, we are going to use the cloud, and so here are the risks. Okay, we are going to separate. I think that the first exercise is what are the data that they need to put on cloud, and what are the data that they need to put on like maybe a private cloud, something like that. So I think understanding that differences as well, the acceptance of and the understanding of it really differs in all the regions that I work with. Like I see like Australia is like way ahead of even Japan. Like Japan has the fastest internet in APAC, but in terms of this cloud adoption technology, they went from 0 to like 85 right away. That's what I'm looking at. Like all the three-letter banks in Australia, they're already all on the way to the like fully cloud infrastructures basically. And in Japan, I only see SMBC is like the most ready bank for cloud, and while the other two mega banks are still on their way to it, basically.
Mary?
Yeah, I'd say we see a combination of both. So, the really exciting news that I'm sure many of the people on this call saw today was out of Starling Bank, right? So Starling Bank has basically created their infrastructure on the cloud, and they're now promoting it as banking as a service. So they're letting any company kind of use their infrastructure to enable payments, which is, who would have thought that was possible even 5 years ago, right? So that's something that definitely they built and consumed on their own. I think the larger traditional financial institutions are realizing that they can't host a lot of their infrastructure anymore. They're looking to solution partners like Equinix to help them rethink approaches to core infrastructure and how do they replace some of that core banking with elements of the cloud. But I think forever there's going to be a need to have something and some data that stays on-prem, and then also things that are better utilized in the cloud. And to everyone's point here, anything that's big data and large amounts that need to be compute fast belongs to the cloud.
Yeah, sounds good. Dr. Cham and Abhilash, I want to get your thoughts on data localization, right? I think some of you briefly alluded to this. How do you think firms are kind of tackling that issue of increasing regulation when it comes to data localization, and when it comes to the impact on fintech startups who rely on multinational cloud firms, right? Is there anything specific that you are seeing?
Well, I think my view is there's a collaboration that we need to do more, right? This is two different worlds. One is very innovative, one is highly regulated. So how we can get a balance and how we can make use of the strength of each other to really co-create the values for the end users, whether it's SMEs or whether it's a consumer retail banking. So that's what I think. I always try to come up with that. So I bring in quite a lot of startups to many different traditional banks and also smaller banks, and see whether we can come up with something to leverage on the data and innovation that they have. And I think all these compliance and regulations and all that is an issue. But I see that, for example, Hong Kong MA and MAS, they are doing a great job in terms of trying to, on one hand, protecting the consumers or SME customers. On the other hand, they're encouraging innovation. For example, Hong Kong MA launched what they call the CDI, Customer Data Interchange, and also they launched the Open Banking Initiative, right? All this kind of thing is actually encourage people to make use of data and really providing a lot more values to consumers. And on the other hand, it strengthens the competitive advantage of Hong Kong as a whole in terms of financial center. I think Singapore is doing a similar thing. So I think it's very good to bring them together without the disruption from fintech at the beginning. I think all the speculator will status quo, right? With all these, I think it's actually encouraging them to think out of the box and think something they never did before now is on their roadmap. So Hong Kong MA actually announced the FinTech 2025 roadmap. They're forcing the bank to change, to adopt technologies in different areas of the bank. So I think it's encouraging to see that, and I hope to see more. Thank you.
Yeah. Abhilash?
Data residency is real. Okay, you cannot escape from it, unfortunately. Example, I logged into Google Pay, right? Single user. I have two banks, one in Europe, one in India, right? Data privacy regulation of data residency for each of these two regions say that EU data should never leave EU geoperimeter. India region should never leave India geoperimeter. How do you handle it? Where will you store your single login user ID? How do you classify the data? Is it EU data? My login, is it a EU specific data tuple or is it an India specific data tuple? Then one login, one app, Google app, one app in App Store, I logged in. all the transactions that I did for EU region has to be stored in the EU data region. So that means my architecture should support. Cloud is ready. Cloud has all the cloud service providers have EU data stores, Ireland, Germany, everywhere, and then India, of course, Mumbai, Hyderabad, everybody. But my architecture should be ready that while data in transit can come in an encrypted fashion, but data at rest, that particular data tuple should be in Ireland, if Ireland is my data zone, and in Mumbai for that particular data zone. So your architecture should plan and should allow, especially if you're in this industry, in this fintech sector, for the data residency rules that are there. It all drives from your architecture. I would urge everybody over here to go to the reactive manifesto, understand it, build it as a part of your data storage in different regions. That is right there, front and center. You cannot escape from that. Fortunately, there are enough and more guidelines. It's not a rocket science to solve. It's out there, as long as your architecture supports it.
That's encouraging, Abhilash. I'm sure the CTO and how you probably think of cloud for your own business. I think that's very interesting, right? So thanks for sharing that. Dr. Cham, I want to come back to you, especially on the angle of open source, right? And how open source is kind of enabling this whole thing of cloud adoption, the usage, technologies like AI, ML, and in the fintech space, if you have any, especially in the work that you do with the OpenCert, if you have any valuable insights to share there.
The people are getting more confidence on the adoption of technologies, including cloud, as we just talked about. And now they open up even more because they build the confidence already. So they start to appreciate the advantage of open sources. And also they're seeing the limitation of the proprietary software, right? In terms of the functions, in terms of pricing, in terms of all that, right? So we see the market is open. Even the banks are open up for more open sources tools, and including government. As you can think, they're very conservative. They actually have a specific policy to adopt open source tools. And they're seeing that rather than seeing all this negative thing about open sources, they are seeing the beauty of open sources. For example, open source is actually including the concept of cloud sourcing, right? Because everybody is building on the top of each other and getting all together. So this is the general trend. The question is how fast the financial services will adopt it. I see the pioneers, not only they adopt cloud, of course, hybrid or private, cloud or public cloud. Hybrid cloud is actually more popular. And then they start to explore. When I want to enable my colleagues and staff to really make use of big data, right? Democratize the data literacy as we speak before, just like Airbnb, right? So they have to adopt open sources. See how much open source tools Airbnb is using. See how much open source code they're contributing to the software foundation, the open source foundation, right? So if we can adopt the beauty from other industry to the banking industry, for example, that will actually help the industry to grow. You can, to have a much better competitive edge to compete with all other financial services competitors, including the fintech competitors. They are not just digital savvy, they're also data savvy. How you can compete with a virtual bank, right, without the data savvy capabilities. So that's what I'm thinking and trying to help these traditional banks to transform, right? Data, open sources, crowdsourcing, innovation, and all that, I think is very important for the future of the financial service incumbents.
Yeah, makes sense, Dr. Cham. Andre, I want to come to you, and especially as you track the APAC region a lot more closely, are you seeing any specific trends that are different from other regions in the Asia Pacific region? And maybe if you have any sort of like insights as to what could be driving some of this, and why is APAC any different from and Americas or EMEA? Is it at all? Andre, you're on mute.
Thank you. So thank you, Mohan. So I guess like the biggest difference between APAC and the other regions, I mean, every region has their own unique perspective. Like Abhilash mentioned, like the EU part, especially when you're working with a lot of like private data, like they have the GPDR initiative that prohibits like certain data to be open for public, and this type of like regulations basically will affect the coverage of the data set that is available from that particular region, and that will affect what comes the next is like, okay, if for example a user is only particularly interested in that to analyze something in EU region, and they will say like, oh, you don't have the EU data, so okay, we're not gonna start analyzing that. So they might actually go onto like completely different path with like some other, for example, like guys in APAC that's like, well, we don't really need the EU data, we're happy with APAC data or the US data. So like one region might actually be more advanced in certain type of data set, like analyzing a certain data set, adopting technology in one space compared to like the others. And I think we're seeing like in a whole global company that some of the regions are still stuck with what you call, like Dr. Chow mentioned, like the old services, the installed services, like from this software companies, while some of the regions are already adopting the open sources. Like first thing, like when they're trying to do a project, it's like, and if I ask them like, hey, do you know how to do this? Like it was like, yeah, there's a GitHub. It's like, all right, so you guys are fine basically. But then the guys there's like, yeah, how do you do this in Excel, or how do you do this in even like Tableau? Tableau is a very powerful software, but it cannot do everything. I mean, you have to know the type of data and what is the fastest and most effective way of doing it. And we see this a lot, differences from our perspective, basically.
All right. We just have the last couple of minutes here. Mary, I want to come to you to quickly check how someone like Equinix has changed over the years, right? And adapting to this change in terms of your customers and what they expect out of you. Has it changed? Has the business model for you changed and pertaining to this trend?
Absolutely. So we began 20 some odd years ago as kind of a place for networks, a neutral media ground for networks to exchange data traffic. And from there, we started building ecosystems, whether it be for financial services, for cloud and IT services, all of the above. But today, our customers look at us not for pure co-location services, and in layman's terms, that means access to space and power, but they're really looking to us to help them kind of innovate their own infrastructure. So we've recently, in the last couple of years, launched a whole host of our own digital services. And in the interest of time, I won't go into any of those, but it's basically giving a public cloud experience in a very private, secure data center environment. So we're constantly innovating on our own platform to really drive what we call interconnection and facilitating businesses to do business with each other, their suppliers, vendors, et cetera. And then a final point is we're always listening to our customers, and we're always putting new data centers and building new infrastructure in markets where our customers need us to be. So one that I'm super excited about is we recently acquired GPX in India. So we've now taken ourselves to India. So if you're in India, a business in India looking to expand into the rest of the world, now you've got a data center that can help with our footprint expand you out to those international markets. And likewise, if you're a business in the United States who wants to innovate and reach new customers in India, we provide a platform for that. Awesome. So absolutely constantly innovating. Great,
thank you. We're almost at the end of it. If each of you could just take 30 seconds for your final thoughts, if you had any thoughts, be it for fintech startups or for financial institutions who have tuned in, any specific advice, and just limit it to 30 seconds, if you will. Abhilash, we'll start with you and followed by Dr. Chow.
Sure. Well, my advice is look at cloud as an enabler, but really have the discipline in your architecture to enable it. There are not enough DevOps guys out there, so try to upskill your existing resources, read about it, understand it before you jump in. It is not a be-all, end-all solution. Let your architecture demand it.
Great. Dr. Chan?
Yeah, I think everything back to customers. So we look at the customer journey, how you can make use of cloud how you can make use of data to make the customer journey much better than before. I think one of the banks, I won't name them, they call it bank less and live more. I probably you know which one it is. So I think I not particularly want to sell them, but I think this is a very good vision, right? It seems that bank less is like don't go to bank to do any business with them. In fact, it's not. When you live better, right? Bank less, and then you feel better, and then you will have consume more financial services from them. So I think that is customer journey.
Yeah, that's great. Andre?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess from my side, I just want to echo Abhilash. Cloud is not like an all-in solution. At the end of all the technology, at the end of the day, it's still the human factor. And I guess like what Dr. Cham said, upskilling the human factor to be able to, make use of these different technologies, the cloud, and even like you're still in on your PC solution, like your local solution. If you can take the best out of everything, that is potentially close to what a perfect system is from my perspective. Thank you.
Right. And Mary?
Yeah, I would finish with Dr. Charm's absolute thing is the way to securing the hearts and minds of your customers and innovating the services they demand is through the cloud.
Awesome. I think if I were to summarize, I think all of you echo that cloud is a great enabler for scale, for analytics, especially in the financial sector. But also, I think all of our panelists are sharing a word of caution in terms of letting your architecture drive it, letting your customer journey be the prime motive why you're getting on this journey in the first place. Right. With that, thank you so much to all the panelists. It was a very insightful conversation, and I hope the audience had some insightful key takeaways as well. With that, over to you, Mushi.
Thank you so much, Mohan. Very delightful moderation. I think very, very insightful as well for all of us. And I'd like to first thank S&P for their support and partnering with us for the conference and also for our other sponsors. But this panel has been very, very insightful. I would say this is about taking, putting the wings onto the flight that financial services firms want to take and join the tech ecosystem, right? But you got to be careful that the wings fit, and that's where the element of what kind of cloud you need and what kind of services you need becomes important. So thank you all, and to our audience, thank you for having stayed with us through the day. We've had tremendous response. We've had delegates registered from over 99 jurisdictions and locations globally, keeping in track with how we've had over the year last year and over 1,800 delegates. So once again, thank you to all of our speakers, our moderator Mohan, and to S&P for the sponsorship of this panel. And keep following Virtual FinTech Fair on our LinkedIn, and we'll send over the recordings to you very soon. So thank you very much. And on behalf of my team, I would also want to thank my team who've been putting a lot of effort in organizing this. We wish you a good night and see you next time. Thank you.